The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift. My take. Those of you who aren't at all interested in Taylor Swift or who haven't heard the Tortured Poets Department, look away now. This is probably not for you. If you are a fan of Taylor Swift's music, then you're probably going to be angry at some of the things I have to say here. Other things you'll probably like. So stick around. I don't mind if you disagree. We're bound to disagree. I've watched lots of reactions to these songs on YouTube, and everybody is different. What one person likes, another doesn't. What one person thinks is their favourite song, another hates. So it's always going to be like that. I'm not sure whether I would call this a review of the album. It's just some of my thoughts about the album. I'll begin by making some general points, and it's here where you'll probably disagree most strongly with me. Then I'll go on to consider some of the highlights and lowlights of the album. This is going to be a long one. It's a long album with 31 songs. There's a lot to say about it. I hope if you're interested in Taylor Swift, if you're interested in this album, you'll stick around to hear what I have to say. So here we go, first of all, with some general comments. My first observation is that it's too long. Even the original 16-track album was too long, in my opinion, even before she dropped the second album, the second volume at 2 a.m. I think I'm going to refer to them as Volume 1 and Volume 2. With so many tracks, the really good tracks tend to get lost among the not-so-good tracks. I'm someone who likes to listen to an entire album all the way through. I think there's something about listening to a body of music created at a particular time and place, something that unifies an album into an album, rather than just a random collection of songs. That's also why, for example, I don't generally listen to a best-of album either. At over 2 hours, this is just too long to be able to do that without your attention wandering, without drifting off when one of the less interesting tracks comes along. And believe me, I spent probably 4 hours this morning listening to this album, taking notes. And by the end of it, I'm sure my mind was somewhat fogged, and from time to time I was drifting away. And then also any unified theme that the album might have has just become too diluted. You see something in writers. When they become big names, bestsellers, they start brushing aside their need for an editor. They think they know best, or they know their book will sell anyway, which is probably the case. But artists are never the best judges of their own work. Writers need independent, objective editors, and that's what Taylor Swift needed here. She needed someone to say, I know you love this song, but let's be honest, you love them all. But this one has to go. Kill your darlings. That's something often heard in the writing and editing industry. Kill your darlings. I think if this album were limited to the best of the songs, let's say the magic number of 13, with 13 songs, this may well have been a masterpiece. Less is sometimes better. Then, maybe, later in the year, she could have released a surprise second album, as she did with Folklore and Evermore. And by then, perhaps, the weaknesses of some of the songs may have become apparent with some distance and perspective, and she may even have written some new ones, some better ones. Now, in this single album, I would have certainly included tracks from both volumes of the anthology. My second point is just very brief, namely that, overall, I prefer Volume 2 to Volume 1. And the reason for this leads me to my third point. I don't know about you, but I'm somewhat over Jack Antonoff's production tricks. He's been working with her now for a long time, but maybe this working relationship has run its course. I'm glad she brought in Aaron Dessner for Folklore and Evermore, but even he has now been working with her for a long time. This is the fourth, or maybe the fourth and fifth, albums that they've worked on together, and he's also worked on her with a bunch of the vault tracks for the re-recorded albums. Even so, I think I like Volume 2 here more than Volume 1 because his presence is greater. However, there's nothing very new or adventurous in the music here. Taylor is well within her safe space, her comfort zone, and maybe it's time to move on. Personally, I'd like for her to move back to a more live band sound in her studio recordings. At this stage in the music world, this would be refreshing and perhaps would offer new challenges. My fourth point is about the lyrical content of the album, the themes of the album, really. I've spent quite a lot of time among people who say they don't care much for all of Taylor's breakup songs, that breakup songs is all she ever writes. I've worked hard to convince them that there's so much more to her writing than this. But now we have this album. Admittedly, it's been a while since we had such a full-on breakup album as this, but still, the theme is a bit old. The blaming of the other person for everything just doesn't wash anymore, if it ever did. Now, I know she doesn't entirely do that in every song, but it is still the overall impression that one is left with. It's mostly the other person's fault. My ideal 13-track version of the album would almost certainly include all of the songs that are not about her past or her present relationships. Having said that, she does write these songs very well, it can't be denied, and even here she still finds new ways, some new twist to put onto an old story, so I give her full marks for that. This next point is really addressed towards the Swifties. I'm tired of people playing the game, who is this one about? With some of her songs, this is pointed and obvious, and there needn't be any discussion about it. But it isn't always the case. And I've noticed, particularly with this album, that the fans aren't even in agreement about this. It doesn't matter. Let me say that again. It doesn't matter. In fact, such an exercise can really detract from the songs. Let's grant as an absolute given that she's writing about her own experience, plus perhaps her friends' experiences, and maybe this already clouds the issue somewhat. And add to that potentially literary references, and that sometimes, as we know, she writes fiction herself. The point is that the best songs transcend the specific relationship or incident that triggers them. They become universal themes, or else they quickly become irrelevant. Taylor draws upon various sources. Her own experience is just one among them. She uses these to explore emotional questions. We need not and should not expect that every detail of every song refers to some specific person or event. Some will, many won't. Because I believe, actually, that Taylor Swift is a much more creative writer than that. Sometimes she makes stuff up, and this is great. So stop searching for the who, the when, the what, and listen to what the song is actually saying, to what it's actually about. On a more positive note, I think Taylor's vocal performance on this album is among her best ever. And one thing I do like about the production is that it allows her voice, with all its subtleties, and she really does have a lot of subtleties and uses them so well, to take pride of place in the mix. There are fewer effects on her voice here too, which I welcome. And I also think this gives a chance for the lyrics to really shine. Again, I think this works best perhaps in Volume 2. And about those lyrics, she still shines here. This is her real superpower. I was driving the other night with a friend in the car to one of our trivia nights. We always listen to music on the way and we often chat about music. He knows I like Taylor Swift, and at his suggestion we started listening to some of the album. We jumped in somewhere in the second volume. Now, my friend usually chats a lot, but a long, unusual pause that lasted for almost 2 songs fell upon the car. At some point he finally said, "I'm sorry I'm not saying anything, I'm just really taking in the lyrics." Now he's not a lyrics guy. He's really into the musical side, the instrumentation and so on. So for him to say this was a real testament to the power of Taylor Swift's lyrics. Okay, so those are my general comments that basically cover the whole album. Now I'm just going to point out what I think are some of the highlights and lowlights of the album. Now I might do a detailed analysis of some of these songs at a later date, but I do have a lot of other stuff that I want to get through first. Fortnight, the opening track on the album, is a great song, and it's a great first single. Although these days with streaming, I'm not exactly sure what a single actually is anymore. I actually do also like the production on this track, and it's just a marvellous bass line that runs through it. The lyrics are great. All my mornings are Mondays, stuck in an endless February. I took the miracle move-on drug. The effects were temporary. It's genius. And the way she so casually delivers the line, I want to kill her. It's almost without any affect, as a psychiatrist would say. Her emotions are deadened. Even "It's ruining my life" is delivered with hardly any emotion. It's brilliant. I think Post Malone's contribution, though subtle, is perfect. Every time I hear that final solo of his, I get a shiver down my spine. I can't imagine that this is going to be anything but a massive hit. The Tortured Poets Department, the title track. Again, I actually do like the production here. At least at first, but then I think it becomes a bit too Jack Antonoff-y. It's a great melody and there are some great lyrics. I love the self-deprecating lyric, "You're no Dylan Thomas, I'm not Patti Smith, this ain't the Chelsea Hotel, we're modern idiots." I can imagine people rushing to Google to find out who these people and places are. Just as a note, the Chelsea Hotel also links to Leonard Cohen here. Patti Smith lived for a while in the Chelsea Hotel, and of course Leonard Cohen wrote the song Chelsea Hotel No. 2. Down Bad uses a fantastic central metaphor to describe the relationship that's in this song. The metaphor is being taken up by a UFO, being experimented upon, but also being shown the wonders of the universe. It's an absolutely brilliant metaphor. In So Long London, I love the idea that the end of a relationship involves the loss of so much more than just the person. You lose a place, you lose a group of friends, you lose an entire situation, a lifestyle, you lose London. And maybe this is even more important than the loss of the relationship itself. As she says, I'm just mad as hell because I loved this place. Who's afraid of little old me? Well, I think this song is kind of hilarious, or is that just me? This is the mad woman from Folklore, completely unhinged and off the leash. And I love the way from time to time she screams out the title, "Who's afraid of little old me?" But only sometimes, because that makes it really cool. Put narcotics into all my songs and that's why you're still singing along, she says. Or maybe spells. She is, after all, leaping from the gallows and levitating down the street in a very witch-like fashion. This song is great fun. I can do it with a broken heart. I think this is a really good example of where I think a different production would have helped this song. It needed someone other than Jack. It's a really harrowing song to listen to. The lyrics just pound away at you. But it's a brilliantly captured portrait of pain. It hurts to listen to it, which is appropriate because it maybe hurts, Taylor to live it and maybe to sing it. This is a real ouch song and brilliant for it. Clara Bow. This takes me back to her vault song on Speak Now, Nothing New, when she imagines someone coming along to replace her. In the Fox studios back in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, there was always some blonde bombshell poised to replace the blonde bombshell who came before her. And this song reminds me of that, although it doesn't directly reference it. Whereas in Nothing New, she fears the idea of being replaced. Here, do you just get the feeling, just a little bit, that she would perhaps welcome it? After all, at the end of I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, she does throw out the challenge, try and come for my job. I think no one would be surprised if she was a little tired of it all by now. Go direct a movie, Taylor. We'd really love you to. The Black Dog, which is the first track on the second volume, feels like the most emotionally raw and sincere of the breakup songs here to me. It digs just a little more deeply into the complex emotions, other than just anger and a sense of betrayal, although they're there too. I even like Jack's production here, particularly the way the song builds musically to a climax, even as the lyrics do. If I had to choose between the various breakup songs to keep on a shorter version of this album, this would certainly be near the top of the list. Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. I've chosen this as a highlight, first because it has a complex, haunting melody that I will come to love in time. But secondly, because I think it has the most complex and layered lyrics that demand some pretty deep exploration. It's not a song that immediately grabs you, but it eats into your heart and mind after repeated listening. How did it end? This is perhaps the other breakup song that hits hardest. Again, the lyrics just come at you. When to breathe, right? And it is again a complex and beautiful melody which grows on you. It's happening again. That line, it's happening again, is full of despair. And this line takes my breath away. My beloved ghost and me, sitting in a tree, D-Y-I-N-G. Twisting forever, the usual sitting in a tree, K-I-S-S-I-N-G. This is another ouch moment for me. I love the ouch moments. Thank you, Amy. I love the almost country feel of this song, and I like the narrative style of the lyrics. There are shades of mean here from Speak Now. I think this is a really good song about bullying, and we know that Taylor experienced bullying at school, and we know that she felt bullied by critics, hence the song Mean. So I think all of this feeds into this song, and I take the Kim, K-I-M, in the title with a pinch of salt. That adds nothing to the song and perhaps detracts from it by once again making the focus on that event. This song is about much more than that, even if Taylor herself doesn't actually know it. So when I'm listening to this song, I ignore the Kim reference, and then I think I hear the real song. Peter. I absolutely love this song, partly, surely, because I'm a sucker for literary references. I love the way Taylor uses the Peter-Wendy story as an overarching metaphor for the particular relationship she's talking about here. And again, who cares who it is? In Cardigan on Folklore, we heard the reference Peter losing Wendy. Here she fleshes out the narrative, although it becomes more Wendy losing Peter. And what a beautiful melody. Now, although this is clearly referencing for the most part Peter Pan, I can't help noticing a Narnia Chronicles reference here. Am I alone in seeing that when she talks about closets like cedar? I think this points to the famous wardrobe through which the kids access Narnia. There's another Peter here in this story, and there are also growing up issues. Peter and Susan are told they can't return to Narnia because they're getting too old. Clever Taylor. Or am I reading too much into this? I don't think so. It's a great song about the dreams and promises of youth, and yes, the need to grow up. A great song about nostalgia and yearning. This is probably my favourite track on the album. Finally, in the highlights section, The Bolter. This, I think, is the most catchy song on the album, the most sing-along song with a great hook. It tells a great story about the eponymous character, the Bolter, but it's not without its darker moments lyrically, of course. Now let's turn to some of the lowlights, and I'm sure this is where most of you will disagree with me. I'm probably picking some of your favourite songs here. First, But Daddy I Love Him. This is one damned angry song, though there is an attempt to lighten it with some humour. I think, though, that maybe this one could have been left on the cutting floor, though I also understand how it might appeal to people. Fresh Out the Slammer, I found a bit underwhelming. The same with Guilty as Sin. I Can Fix Him. No, really I can. Again, I bet this is one of your favourites. First of all, I find there's something slightly jarring about the music in this track, particularly in the opening bars. But also I think that ultimately this track is somewhat superfluous. I don't think there's anything new here that she hasn't said already, and frankly said it better. So, High School. Now again, you probably love this song. I get it. But it feels to me like a tacked on afterthought. I'd better put something in about Travis, right? But I think the most important reason that it fails for me is because after all the heartbreak, after all the it was great, now it's gone moments here, after it's happening again, it's hard to take this isn't it all great moment very seriously. Taylor, will you still be wanting to sing this 6 months from now? Am I being too cynical? Don't tell me the thought hasn't crossed your mind, and hers. I don't begrudge her this moment at all, but maybe it's too soon to be putting it into a song. And this is another reason for maybe holding off on a second album until the dust has settled a bit. I'd be definitely dropping this one from this album. Some might think its jangly upbeatness brings a welcome moment of happiness, of lightness to a very heavy album. But for me it jars. It just doesn't ring true. Having said that, what are the odds that this will be the next single and a smash hit? So that's actually it for the Lowlights. Coming to the end of this, I'm surprised, and you'll be pleased to see, that there are far more highlights than lowlights. Of course, I haven't mentioned all of the songs, and maybe I haven't even mentioned some of your favourite songs. But for me, these just fall in the in-between box, neither highlights nor lowlights. Your take may be, and probably will be, completely different from mine. Probably my own take on some of these songs will change over time. And I think that my take on any piece of music always says more about me than it does about the music itself. And possibly the same is true for you too. I'm sure I'll return to several of these songs later and look at them more closely, but for now I don't want all of my Taylor Swift energy to be focused on just the latest, shiniest thing. There's so much more to look at.